everybody, and welcome once again to the Tea Party is Dead podcast. I am your host, Jim, and today we have a very special guest with us. He is Greg Mannarino, a former Wall Street analyst for Bear Stearns and the author of The Game is Rigged, How to Profit from the Coming Global Economic Collapse. Greg, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Well, before we get into the line of questions, I got to get a remark from you. Before this interview, I happened to go on silverdoctors.com, and they just reported that the CFTC has filed charges against 12 firms for selling phantom paper, gold, and silver, which I think is huge. I'll just read a few lines and get your comments on it. The defendants claim to sell physical metals, including gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and copper, to retail customers in retail commodity transactions. Under the defendants' retail commodity transactions, the customers allegedly make a down payment on certain quantities of physical metals, and on and on and on, for those people that know what the difference is between paper silver and physical silver is. If this becomes bigger and bigger, where do you see the price of gold and silver going?
I've talked about exactly what you just said for years. There is so much manipulation going on here across the board, and it's going to come to roost. And when that happens, when people realize that this paper game with regard to the metals is just that, I think we're going to see gold and silver spike. There's no doubt about it. What will happen, and may not be too far off, is the free market, which has been effectively killed by our policymakers, by the investment banks, by the central banks. The free market will once again, come back. It has to. The forces involved in a free market globally are enormous, are absolutely enormous. And I write about this in my book. And no matter what they try to do over time with all the manipulation, which we understand the whole system is manipulated upside down, backwards, and sideways. And at one point, investor confidence is going to get shaken. For example, going back to what you just said about the silver and gold paper nonsense that's going on here. And that's when this whole house of cards is going to collapse, and it's not going to be a slow burn like most people are saying. It's going to happen in a matter of days, if not maybe weeks at most. But this whole Ponzi scheme manipulated system cannot be sustained, and it is going to collapse.
It almost seems that when you have this fiscal cliff nonsense and the story that Silver Doctors just broke, it's almost like a perfect storm. Eventually, when it hits, it's going to hit hard, and people will be suffering economic whiplash for decades, if not generations.
It's the game changer of them all. We are in now the biggest bubble the world has ever known, and that is the debt bubble. The debt bubble is responsible for the global population explosion that we've had for decades. When the debt bubble bursts, it's going to pull down the global population because resources are not going to be available. Millions of people are going to die on a global level. This is unprecedented. This debt bubble that we are in. First of all, let's back up a little bit. Every single economic and financial bubble throughout history has burst. They have to burst. Why is that? Because they rise above a level that can be sustained by any means. Now, what's going on now is, for example, the Federal Reserve is now the lender of last resort. We have QE4, which is going to start the beginning of next year, because the sterilized bond buying purchase program known as Operation Twist is ending. Now, the Federal Reserve has to get in there and manipulate rates and buy bonds. If they don't, the whole system collapses right there at that moment. Boom, party over. Now, they're fueling a debt problem with more debt. We've seen what's going on over in Europe. This is not sustainable. And at one point, that bubble will burst, just like every single other bubble before it. We had the housing bubble, the equity bubble in 2008. Before that, we had the dot-com bubble. You can go back through history. The crash of 1929, that was a bubble. Every bubble bursts. And this one is the mother of them all. And when that, you have to understand that when I mean by a debt bubble, money, cash is debt. It's going to become nearly worthless once this happens. Now, the scenario is this. Once the debt bubble bursts, we're going to see interest rates rise exponentially. That'll be the free market that's dictating interest rates. The Federal Reserve cannot continue to manipulate this forever. Can't happen. So the free market is going to dictate interest rates, which are going to go skyrocket, which is going to put enormous pressure on the equity markets, which are going to sell off. And as a matter of fact, in my book, I put a Dow target somewhere around 4,000. It could go lower than that. And you have to understand, people don't really realize what this means. So all of this cash is going to look for a place to go. And that place is going to be commodities, precious metals, and that's why they're going to go to the moon as we move forward here. Now, I hope sincerely that the Federal Reserve or whoever's behind the manipulation of the metals continues to do it, because all it will do is give me, you, and all of your listeners out there a chance to buy more at these ridiculously suppressed prices. Because again, when the free market decides to once again show up here, fair market value across the board is going to be realized for commodities, precious metals, interest rates, and that is going to be the game changer of them all. And it's going to lead to civil war, regional war, and maybe even global war.
You know, I was going to ask you before I saw the article on Silver Doctors about where you see gold and silver going, but I think that story pretty much says it all because, and I don't need to tell you this, that they're now reporting at the U.S. Mint that American Silver Eagle proofs are now sold out for 2012. There's been a spike in gold eagles from the U.S. Mint since Obama has been elected. It's just going to keep on going and going after that.
And it's funny. Look at what happened this week. We had the silver and gold smackdown in the face of unprecedented buying by governments, by the richest people in the world, and a falling dollar. I mean, if this isn't in our faces manipulation, again, I'm loving every minute of it because every time this happens, the smart people out there are adding to their physical positions on gold and silver.
Now, let's fast forward and say that the economy has collapsed. I heard Jim Willie say on one of his interviews that he seemed to just be spitballing and throwing out ideas of possibly two types of U.S. currencies, one domestic and one foreign, and having the foreign currency have some sort of tax attached to it. I was just wondering what the odds are of you thinking something like this could happen.
What I know will happen at one point here is this system, this debt-based economic model built around fake or fiat money, is right now in a terminal phase on a global level. So what is going to happen here is there has to be and will be a move back to real money backed by gold and silver. And that's what's going to be demanded, I believe, from governments around the world in their trade. I mean, this system is done. It's played out. And they all end the same way. All of these types of fake systems. And they always go back to a sound system. And that's where we are right now. And that's why we're in this transition period. Now, this is going to lead to a massive, and I'm understating that grossly, transfer of wealth. That's what really is going on here. And that's why the smart money is getting out of fiat and getting into real assets. And the people out there that are holding these things are going to be the winners. And the ones that are not are going to be the woeful losers. And that's why I think shows like this are just so important. And we just really need to get more people to understand that this is not far off. This isn't something that we're talking about that's going to be 10 years down the line. Now, as you know, I am an analyst. I've been looking at charts for over 20 years, every day. For over 20 years, I look at, hundreds a day. And I'm not bad at reading these things. And I can say this. If we stay on the current path, the collapse that we're talking about can literally be months away. not years, months away. And that's why it's so important for people to realize that they need to do something and do it now.
Right. Well, since we're talking about currencies, I was wondering what your thoughts were on the new $100 bill that still hasn't been released. I believe the version came out in 2009, and I'm not sure if you heard about Bix Weir's interpretation and the meaning behind it, how if you've seen it, half of it is gold, one side of it is gold in color, and the other looks like the standard fiat. It almost sounds like that people are trying to communicate this is what's going on, folks. And once the hot potato is caught by the last person, then, you really have no one to blame but yourself.
I think, yes. There's no doubt in my mind at all that behind closed doors here, they realize that this system is over. This debt-based economic model based around fiat is over, and they have to go back to a gold or a commodity base. So it will be gold, because gold is the most stable asset the world has ever known. That's why it will be backed by gold. And China's been setting up for this for years, something I've been talking about. And the United States is going to have to follow suit. You see, the Chinese, I've known many Chinese investors and traders throughout the years. They are very smart, very shrewd people, and they're sitting there laughing at us here in the United States. They're watching our government make mistake after mistake after mistake. Or, there also could be a very sinister side to this, because you have to understand that they want to keep people in fiat. They don't want people to get into the metals. And they understand that, because this is that transfer of wealth that I was speaking about. And they're setting this up. They're actually going to set it up. And the ones out there that are not in fiat, and I'm talking about the richest people in the world. I'm talking about the corporations. I'm talking about the central banks, for example. They're acquiring gold in mass. Meanwhile, they're still dispersing their paper. It's the biggest conflict of interest in the history of the world. Think about it. The more gold that they hold and the more paper that they print, well, the higher the value based in dollars of their gold is going to go. It's really an incredible conflict of interest. And not only that, they run a Ponzi scheme. But it's insane what's going on here. And they are positioning themselves correctly, and that is backing out of this fiat nonsense game, getting themselves into real assets, because there is going to be a new monetary system backed by gold. And when that happens, you do not want to be holding paper.
How fragile is the petrodollar from collapsing? And the reason why I ask this is because this certainly isn't a question that you haven't heard before. But for a lot of people that don't know, Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah recently came out of back surgery. And when he came out of back surgery, he was nowhere to be seen for almost 10 days. And that made a lot of investors anxious, because he really has no succession line. Is the petrodollar that fragile from collapsing?
Well, Saudi Arabia is now building the largest oil refinery in the history of the world with China right now. The petrodollar was established during the Vietnam War, as you know. The Vietnam War was literally fought to establish the United States dollar as the world's reserve and establish the petrodollar. That's really what it was all about. It had nothing to do with communism or anything else. And the petrodollar, since that time, has been defended with ferocity. And they will continue to do that, and that's the most scary part of it all. I mean, why did we go into Libya, really? I mean, they're an OPEC nation. We wanted to control the oil. Kuwait, the same kind of thing. And we're going to continue to do that. And this is where I see the two superpowers now. Well, we have our creditor, which is China, who's really the boss, right? And we're the debtor here. And you know, this is not going to end good. This is not going to end well at all, because the Chinese are not going to let the United States push them around. I do not think the next 6 months to a year are going to be very nice to people here in the United States, because again, all our policymakers are doing is lying to the people, not allowing them to say, hey, this is what maybe I should be doing to get myself prepared for this change that's coming. All they're doing is trying to make the American people, for the most part, believe that America is immune to the problems that are affecting the world. And nothing could be further from the truth. The United States is the most indebted nation in the history of the world. And until they rein in this spending, which they cannot do, understand, we have a debt-based economic model, which means we need to borrow money in perpetuity. Once you stop being able to borrow the money, you get a crisis like we have in Europe now. So all this talk about, trying to, curtail the debt and everything is nonsense. They're going to raise the debt ceiling and they're going to spend into oblivion until the bursting of this bubble. That's how this is going to play out. And we are at the precipice right at this moment. And that's why it's so important for people to listen to shows like this. And that's why I'm so eager to do these things, because I'm trying my hardest to get the word out from someone who's been on the inside and sees how this works. It's just awful. It really is.
You happened to mention China. Since we're on that subject, I was just wondering how bullish you are on the Chinese RMB. I believe it's gained somewhere around 10% since spring. I personally see it going much higher over the next 5 to 10 years. I don't know what your thoughts are on it. I have a lot of friends that say, oh, well, I don't have enough money for gold and silver. And I think that's just because they don't understand how cheap you could buy gold and silver at. But I tell them, well, hey, if you don't have money for gold and silver, go down to your local Chase Bank and get some Chinese RMB. They do it for free. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
I've been bullish on it for a very, very long time. I've done videos about it. I've talked about it. I think that the dollar is done. I think the euro is in its current form is done. I think that China has a vested interest in seeing Europe survive this whole thing and will at one point step in. The United States can't do anything. We don't have any money. We'd have to borrow it from China or print it out of thin air. But yeah, I'm bullish on that. But I still would advocate people to try to get their hands on as much gold and silver as they can right now. Don't wait. These prices are ridiculously low. Will they go lower? They might, but who cares? I don't even think about the short term. I get happy when I see it go down because I understand. And I'm sure that you do and your readers do, hopefully to a certain degree. We're not concerned about what happens tomorrow, the next week, or even next month. We're looking down the line here. We're saying, okay, what do we understand is going on? We're in an unsustainable economic situation on a global level, and it's coming down. So we need to think along those lines and be prepared along those lines. And that involves other things as well. It could get so bad. I mean, seriously, we had talked about this. I heard you mention earlier. Post-collapse or during that collapse, there's going to be panic, absolute panic. Stores are going to be wiped out of food, and they probably won't be able to get shipments in. People will be rioting in the streets. That's why here in the United States, a police state is being set up. It already is set up. In every state in the union, as you know, police are being militarized. We have local police being armed with military tactics and military weapons. We have drones that are slated to patrol the skies of the United States. They understand where this is going. They're not stupid. They have people that are very clear as to where this is going and how this is going to affect the people. And the only ones out there that are not prepared are probably 9 out of 10 of the American people. The American people are going to suffer the most out of this entire thing because they're the most, I don't know what the word is, dumbed down, maybe a term here,
ignorant,
than anyone else. And I really believe that's the truth. They're so fixated on the now, on the me. What I mean by that is they're unable to think outside the box. American people are completely forced and pushed into a way of thinking that doesn't allow them the privilege, I guess, to be able to, reason what can happen. and they're just so squashed into this situation that it's scary. It's absolutely frightening. I have friends all over the world, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that the American people as a whole are, quite frankly, the dumbest with regard to economic and financial situations. They're going to get taken advantage of, and this is what's being set up. This is what's being set up right now. The Federal Reserve, through the manipulation of interest rates, has managed to reinflate an equities bubble, and that bubble is going to burst, and people's 401k plans and whatever investments that they think they have are going to go away. It's a very bad thing. It honestly is. And, where do people put their money? What do they do? Number one, get out of fiat. Get yourself into gold. Get yourself into silver, physical assets. And if you're smart enough and you understand how the whole market works, you could create wealth in other ways as well. But that's the most simple thing to do at this time. And, that's the whole thing. Time is of the essence. The window of opportunity is closing. And people need to get on it now.
Not only do I see the window of opportunity closing whenever it comes to Americans getting their hands on precious metals, I feel like the opportunity has closed for some countries that want their gold back from the Federal Reserve.
Oh, absolutely.
You've recently heard that Germany has wanted to get their hands back on their gold. I think Mexico. And they all seem to be lining up. How likely do you see these countries getting their hands back on their gold, and what would the implications be if they realize, hey, Germany, your gold right now just happens to be loaned out to Mexico?
That's exactly what's going on. People have been talking about this exact thing for years. And there's no gold there. It's all gone. There's no doubt about it. And they're going to have to acquire more of it or whatever they're going to have to do. Believe me, they're talking about this behind closed doors, the world central banks. This is a scheme of epic proportions, which is going to cause a great many people to suffer and die. And I'll tell you something else. On the other end of this, probably no one's going to get in trouble, just like the engineered crash of 2008. That was engineered. No one gets in trouble. The financial criminals, they just, walk along their merry way with their golden parachutes, and everyone else gets absolutely fleeced, unless they're smart enough to get themselves on the right side of that equation. What I'm trying to do with my books and my blog and everything is make people understand that they don't have to get fleeced. There is two sides of every trade. And I want people to get on the winning side of this one. That's all this is. This is a financial transaction. That's what this all boils down to. It's not that complicated or not that convoluted. And there is a lot of different things going on. But if you boil it all down to the root, it's a financial transaction. It's that simple. And if you can get yourself on the right side of that by betting against the debt, if you can bet against that debt, by holding metals, you see what people don't understand is by holding precious metals, gold and silver, you're actually taking the short end of that trade. And when the dollar bubble bursts, which is already cracking, it's bursting. We've seen what's happened to the dollar value over the past, several years. When that finally bursts, the value of the metals, specifically right now, is going to skyrocket. So it's just a trade. That's all this is. I'm a trader. I'm an analyst. I'm a market strategist. And that's how I know for a fact that this is what's going to happen and how it's going to play out.
Last week, Secretary Treasurer Tim Geithner proposed to the GOP leadership that it might be a good idea to just grant the full authorization to raise the debt ceiling to the president whenever he wants. I'm sure when you heard this, you had to not just giggle, but laugh and cry at the same time. It's gotten that bad.
Of course. This administration has outspent every single president combined since the inception of this country in his first term. And this is not going to change. This goes back to exactly what I said earlier, that they need to keep acquiring debt because of the debt-based model. If they don't do it, if they decide to balance a budget or reduce the debt, it's party over at that moment. People don't realize that, but that's the way it is. This system is built around the unstoppable, unrelenting acquisition of debt. It can't stop. Once it stops, you have once they admit that they cannot acquire any more debt, you have a crisis like we have over in Europe. That's what's going on. Over in Europe, it's crazy. They're at the point where they cannot acquire any more debt. They have a debt crisis. We understand that. It's being called a debt crisis. But what are they doing to try to fix it? Add debt to the problem. They're trying to say, no, you can still acquire more debt. But they can't. The system is done. It's over. It's finished. And the same thing is going on here. And that's why they're in panic mode. That's why this whole fiscal cliff nonsense is upon us right now. And this whole debt issue is upon us right now. This is not a problem for our children. This is a problem for us. We've been hearing for decades how it's a problem our children are going to have to deal with. Well, guess what? We're the children. We have the problem. We have to deal with it right now, not next week, not tomorrow, right now. I can't be more specific about it. This is a crisis that is going to affect us like a nuclear exchange. And I mean literally, because once this bubble bursts, this debt bubble bursts, and resources become scarce because they will be untouchable by people, they're not going to be able to acquire them, the amount of suffering and death on a global level will be on par with a nuclear exchange. That is how severe this is.
What would happen to the price of silver if we woke up one day and China says that over the last 10 years, they were buying silver for their central banks? Now, I know it's impossible to get to 1% of silver in a central bank just because of the large quantities of gold, but I think realistically it could be possible to get to 1/10 of 1%. And if I know China the way I know China, and I'm no expert in China, I just read and see what most people do, but I try and read between the lines. I think that would be a clear sucker punch to the United States, and you would see silver explode. Would you agree on that?
There's no doubt about it. Over in China, for example, since we're just talking about China, they encourage people to hold metals. They encourage it. You can get it at the bank. Here in the United States, it's not encouraged. They don't want people in it. One day, and who knows when it'll be, China's going to come out with a gold-backed currency. And what is that going to do to the U.S. dollar overnight? China wants the world's reserve. Having the world's reserve currency comes with great benefits. Look what's happened to the United States. Something else is going on here that I don't know if people really realize it, but there is a great opportunity here, believe it or not, for the United States, and that is this: we have had for decades and decades a almost purely consumption-based economy. We don't make anything in this country anymore. We just consume and consume and consume. In order for us to get out of this, we have to switch gears and start making things and go to a production type economy. China, on the other hand, is flipping. They're flipping the other way. They're going from a production to a consumer or consuming based economy. So the opportunity here for the United States is to grab that bull by the horns, and people need to start thinking, we need to make things in our country again. This is why I think people today should pretty much be staying away from the colleges and go into a vocation. Learn how to make something. Learn how to build something. I also agree with Jim Rogers as well. Learn how to become a farmer or learn about agriculture. This is where we need to be in the United States. Because this system is absolutely finished, and we need a whole new way of thinking. And again, I think this may be an opportunity for the American people to start rethinking how they're going to run their lives. Look what's happening to people today. They're getting degrees and they can't do anything with them. They can't find a job. This is going to get much, much worse here. Wages are going to fall. Why are wages going to fall across the board? Very simple. It's a supply and demand. There are a lot of people out there that are looking for your job. They're going to offer people less money for these things. And again, I believe sincerely that if our policymakers really understood what was going on, they would be telling people to go out there and start thinking about, let's fix this country by making things, by making our country competitive on a global level, making products that people want. And that's it. It's going to happen one way or the other. And I think more than likely it's going to be forced upon us by this collapse, which is now inescapable. We have hit a critical mass. And they cannot, no matter what they do, no matter who they want to tax, at whatever rate they want to tax them, it cannot solve the problem. And that's where I see it going.
Gotcha. He is Gregory Mannarino, former Wall Street analyst for Bear Stearns and author of The Game is Rigged, How to Profit from the Coming Global Economic Collapse. Greg, if somebody wanted to look you up online, how would they go ahead and do that?
Real simple. I'm a friendly guy, so you can, just friend me on Facebook. I accept anyone that wants to friend me. That's pretty easy. My actual website was shut down. I'm trying to get a new one up. But you can find me on YouTube. You can put in my name, Gregory Mannarino, or you can put in Market Report, one word, Market Report, and you'll find me. I'm sure if you just Google me, you'll find me somewhere.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thanks for coming on today, and hopefully maybe sometime after the holidays we could have you back.
I hope so. Thank you very much.